Today, we're tackling a big one.
Bring it on.
It's all about money.
Oh, money. Always a fascinating topic.
Well, yeah. But this time we're asking, is it all just an illusion? Like the biggest trick civilization has ever pulled?
Whoa.
Ever catch yourself staring at your bank balance?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is money even real? Or is it just like some big illusion we've all decided to buy into?
Now that's a deep dive.
You sent over some really fascinating stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from the history of the Federal Reserve to like the crazy ride of Bitcoin. So let's get right to it. Is money just this big illusion we've all bought into?
Well, it's a question that has haunted thinkers for centuries. And honestly, your sources bring up some really compelling points.
Like what's really hitting me is how you put together these historical examples with what's happening right now, and even how our financial systems actually work.
It's a great blend.
So I think to really get this, we need to go way back, like before dollar bills, before gold even.
Back to the basics.
Right? Remember learning about ancient civilizations using like cowrie shells as money?
Absolutely. Cowrie shells in China, beads in early Africa, even these giant stone discs on the island of Yap. It's all early forms of money.
So we're talking like really early.
Oh, yeah. And what's so interesting is that none of these things were inherently valuable.
It's not like they were diamonds or something.
Exactly. Their worth came from everyone agreeing that they could be traded for goods and services.
So even back then, it was all about trust.
Yeah, it's like the foundation of any economic system.
Okay, so we've got shells and stones,
Right.
you know, tangible things that had inherent value.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you wonder, how did they decide which shells were worth more than others?
But that's where scarcity comes in.
Okay. If something is rare and people want it, it naturally holds value.
Right.
Like gold, for example, has been prized for its beauty and durability for millennia.
Yeah, definitely.
But imagine having to haul around a sack of shells
Oh my gosh.
to buy a house.
Closing day would be a little awkward.
Yeah.
So what changed the game?
The invention of banking.
Okay.
Instead of carrying around sacks of gold,
Yeah.
people started depositing it with goldsmiths who issued receipts
Right.
that could be exchanged for the gold later.
Banks allowed people to deposit their gold and get a note saying how much they had.
Like a receipt for your gold.
Exactly. It made transactions smoother and safer. But here's where things get interesting. Banks realized they could lend out some of those deposits.
So they're not just holding on to the gold?
Nope. They're putting it to work. And by doing that, they're essentially creating more money in circulation.
Wait, so they're just making money out of thin air?
It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the basic idea. And it's called fractional reserve banking.
Fractional reserve banking, got it.
And this is really the foundation for how modern finance works. Banks become these middlemen facilitating lending and borrowing, and that fuels economic growth.
But it also brings in debt and interest, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It adds another layer to the whole system, makes it more complex. But, and this is a big but, this potential for growth also carries the risk of bubbles and crashes.
And that brings us to tulip mania. Back in the 17th century,
Oh, yeah.
people went crazy for tulips.
People were literally mortgaging their homes, spending everything they had to buy tulip bulbs, convinced they'd be rich.
It sounds so crazy. Who would trade their house for a flower?
It's a perfect example of speculation and what happens when everyone follows the crowd. The price of tulips went through the roof. And then just as quickly, the bubble bursts.
And everyone's stuck holding these bulbs that are suddenly worthless.
Pretty much.
I mean, we've all made impulse purchases.
Right.
But betting your life savings on a flower?
I know.
That's a whole other level.
And that's a classic example of a speculative bubble.
Okay.
People weren't buying tulips for their inherent value.
So why were they buying them?
They were buying them because they believed the price would keep going up.
And they could sell them for a profit later. It's a recipe for disaster.
And of course, that bubble burst,
That's sadly.
leaving a lot of people financially ruined.
Yeah,
A good reminder that hype can be powerful and dangerous.
absolutely.
A dangerous force.
And we see echoes of that same speculative frenzy.
Where do we see that?
In the 1929 stock market crash and the dot-com bubble of the late 90s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a topic shrouded in mystery.
Oh.
The Federal Reserve.
Ooh.
You know, that institution everyone talks about, but
Me?
few truly understand.
Right.
The sources you sent mention its secretive beginnings on Jekyll Island back in 1910.
Yeah,
Sounds like something out of a conspiracy thriller.
it does, right.
Okay, so we had this secret meeting
Uh-huh.
of financial bigwigs
Uh-huh.
on a secluded island.
Right.
What exactly were they cooking up?
Well, the U.S. had experienced a series of bank panics
Okay.
in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
These events caused widespread financial instability and hardship.
I see.
So the meeting on Jekyll Island
Yeah.
aimed to create a central banking system that could provide stability and prevent future panics.
Oh, interesting.
They envisioned an institution that could manage the nation's money supply and act as a lender of last resort to banks in times of crisis.
So the Federal Reserve was born out of a need for stability
Yeah,
and to prevent financial meltdown.
exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
But the secrecy surrounding its birth is definitely intriguing.
it is.
What were they so afraid of?
Well, transparency wasn't exactly a priority back then. Plus, there was a lot of public distrust of concentrated financial power.
Especially after those bank panics.
Exactly.
So they knew their plan would face scrutiny and opposition.
For sure.
So to avoid public outcry and potential pushback,
Yeah,
they opted for a clandestine approach.
they did.
But that very secrecy ended up fueling the conspiracy theories that surround the Fed to this day. And it raises important questions about accountability.
Oh, absolutely.
After all, the Fed has enormous power to influence the economy
It does.
through its control of the money supply.
Uh-huh.
It can literally print money. That seems like it could have some serious consequences.
It certainly can.
Like what?
Printing too much money can lead to inflation,
Right.
which devalues the currency and makes everything more expensive.
That makes sense.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
The Fed has to walk a tightrope between stimulating economic growth
Right.
and keeping inflation in check.
That sounds incredibly complex
It is.
and risky.
Yeah.
It's making me think about the whole idea of intrinsic value versus speculative value.
Okay.
We talked about how tulip mania was driven by pure speculation.
Right.
But what about something like gold?
Mm.
It's always been considered valuable,
See,
right?
that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Gold does have intrinsic value because it's rare.
Durable,
Yeah.
and has industrial applications.
Right.
But even gold can be subject to speculation.
Really?
Yeah, its price can fluctuate
Yeah.
based on supply and demand.
I see.
As well as investor sentiment.
So even something with inherent value like gold
Mm-hmm.
can be influenced by the same forces that drive those wild speculative bubbles.
Exactly.
That's a little unsettling.
Yeah, it is.
It highlights the complex interplay between intrinsic value and speculative value.
It does.
And it raises a fundamental question.
What's that?
If even something as tangible as gold can be influenced by speculation,
Uh-huh.
what does that say about the nature of money itself?
Welcome back. We were talking about intrinsic value versus speculative value.
Right.
It's so important to understand that,
Yeah.
especially today with things like Bitcoin,
Yeah, exactly.
challenging our ideas of money. It's easy to get caught up in all the hype,
Totally.
especially when you see headlines
Uh-huh.
about people getting rich overnight.
Right. So think of intrinsic value
Right.
as the inherent worth of something,
Okay.
its usefulness or scarcity.
Okay.
A house, for example, provides shelter.
Right.
That's its intrinsic value,
I see.
but its price can fluctuate
Yeah.
based on market trends.
Okay.
That's the speculative part.
Ah,
And this pattern, this disconnect between what something is actually worth and what people think it's worth, it keeps happening throughout history.
like the dot-com bubble.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Or the housing crisis in 2008.
People get swept up in the hype.
They think they're getting in early on something big.
Right.
Reality hits, and the illusion shatters.
Which makes you wonder, are we seeing the same thing now with Bitcoin?
That's a great question.
This whole HODL thing, holding on to Bitcoin no matter what, it feels a lot like tulip mania to me.
It's an interesting parallel, and it leads us right into our next topic, Bitcoin itself. We need to dig into what it actually is and how it works.
Okay, let's do it.
So Bitcoin, a decentralized digital currency built on this thing called blockchain technology.
That's the part that always confuses me.
It can be a bit mind-bending, but we'll break it down. It's all about understanding the tech. And blockchain is the key here.
Okay, but can you explain it? Like, I'm 5,
I'll try. Imagine a giant digital ledger.
like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, kind of, but instead of being in one place, it's spread across tons of computers.
So every transaction,
Yeah.
every Bitcoin sent or received.
Exactly. It gets recorded on this ledger, and multiple computers have to verify it.
So like a public record of every Bitcoin move ever.
Yep. And because it's distributed and constantly updated, it's super secure and transparent.
No one can mess with it.
Pretty much. No single point of failure. No central authority controlling it.
Okay. So that's what attracts people to Bitcoin.
It is. That freedom from governments or banks.
Gotcha. But how was Bitcoin actually created? Is there like a digital mint somewhere?
Not exactly. It's made through something called mining.
Mining, like for gold?
Similar. It involves powerful computers solving complex math problems. And by doing this, they're verifying transactions and adding new blocks to the blockchain.
So like a digital gold rush, miners competing to earn Bitcoin.
It's a good analogy. And just like gold, there's a limited supply of Bitcoin. Only 21 million will ever exist.
So that's part of the appeal, the scarcity.
Definitely.
Is it really smart to hold on to Bitcoin when the price is like a roller coaster?
Well, it comes down to your perspective and your risk tolerance.
So some people are okay with big swings.
Exactly. HA dealers believe Bitcoin will become like the main currency one day, replacing or at least challenging regular money.
They're thinking long term.
Exactly. They see Bitcoin as a superior store of value over time.
Because it's limited, decentralized, and secure.
All of that. So those short-term price changes,
They don't worry about it.
right, they see it as noise. They think the real value will come when everyone's using Bitcoin.
Okay. But haven't we seen this before? Like with tulips, the dot-com bubble,
Yeah.
even the housing crisis?
You're right to be cautious. History does tend to repeat itself.
People get caught up in the hype. They think they're in on something revolutionary,
And the bubbles.
and they're left holding the bag.
It happens. And you have to consider that with Bitcoin, too. It's not without risk.
So is it just another tulip waiting to crash? Or could it actually be the future of money?
That's the million-dollar question. Literally, there are strong arguments on both sides.
Like what?
Well, critics say Bitcoin is too volatile, not used enough in everyday transactions, and governments could just regulate it out of existence.
That makes sense.
But supporters argue that it's still early days. The technology is evolving constantly, and its decentralized nature makes it resistant to control.
So it's kind of uncharted territory.
It is. And whether Bitcoin ultimately succeeds or fails, it's sparking a really important conversation
About what?
about the very nature of money, the role of technology in finance, and the potential for these decentralized systems to disrupt the status quo.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about.
It is. But maybe Bitcoin is still a question mark.
Is it more about the technology itself or the belief that its price will keep going up?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's
Yeah.
a mix of genuine belief in the technology, fear of missing out on potential gains,
Right.
and maybe even a little rebellion against the traditional financial system.
I have to admit, there's
Yeah.
something intriguing
Yeah.
about a decentralized
Okay.
currency
Uh-huh.
free from the control of governments and central banks.
Yeah.
It taps into that desire for freedom,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and control over your own finances.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes Bitcoin so captivating. It challenges the status quo,
Yeah,
forces us to rethink our relationship with money.
that's pretty powerful.
It is, but it's also important to remember that every financial innovation comes with risks.
So after this whirlwind tour,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
through the history of money,
Right.
from ancient shells to Bitcoin,
Yeah.
what's the biggest takeaway? Is money really just an illusion?
It's a powerful illusion for sure.
Okay.
What we consider money has taken so many forms
Right.
throughout history, from tangible objects to
Ah.
complex systems of credit and debt.
Oh, it's kind of crazy to think about.
It is.
But ultimately, its value rests on trust and collective belief. It's
Right.
mind-blowing to think
Yeah,
that something as concrete as money
right.
boils down to a shared belief system.
And that belief can be fragile.
How so?
We've seen how speculative bubbles can burst,
Yeah.
leaving financial ruin in their wake.
Right.
We've seen how governments can devalue their currencies
Yeah.
through reckless policies.
It's true.
And we're seeing new technologies like Bitcoin
Yeah.
challenging the traditional financial order.
Yeah. It makes you wonder,
Yeah.
what happens if that trust erodes on a larger scale? What if people lose faith in the systems that underpin our economies?
Right.
What new illusions might emerge in the future of finance?
Those are great questions.
Yeah,
And I don't have all the answers.
I understand.
But one thing's for certain.
What's that?
The story of money is far from over. As technology continues to evolve
Yeah.
and global power dynamics shift,
Right.
the way we think about and use money
Uh-huh.
is likely to keep evolving.
So where do we go from here?
I think the key is to approach this topic with an open mind
Okay.
and a healthy dose of skepticism.
I like that.
Question assumptions.
Uh-huh.
Be aware of the risks.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
So don't just blindly follow the hype,
Exactly.
whether it's gold or Bitcoin or whatever the next big investment craze is.
Yeah, do your research.
Okay.
Understand the underlying value
Right.
and make informed decisions. Remember, money is a tool. It can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
It's up to us to shape its future.
I like that a lot. It feels like we've covered so much ground, from ancient barter systems to like all these complexities of modern finance.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is this. Money in all its forms is ultimately a social construct. Its value rests on trust, shared beliefs,
Right.
the willingness of people to accept it
Right.
as a medium of exchange.
So even if it feels real
Yeah.
and tangible,
Uh-huh.
money's value is, in a way, like an illusion,
Exactly.
like a magic trick we all agree to believe in.
It is kind of like that.
That's kind of freaky.
It is. Think about it. A piece of paper money by itself has no intrinsic value.
Right.
It's just paper.
Right.
But because we believe collectively that it represents something of value, it becomes a powerful tool
Right.
that allows us to trade and invest and build economies.
That makes you wonder, though, what happens when that trust starts to waver?
Right.
We've seen throughout history how financial systems can collapse
Yeah,
when people lose faith in the currency or the institutions behind it.
absolutely.
So that's why understanding the history of money
Yeah,
and the psychology of speculation is so important.
I agree.
It helps us see how these systems work.
Yeah.
Their strengths, their vulnerabilities,
Uh-huh.
the potential consequences when
Yeah.
things go wrong.
It's really important to understand all of that.
And it makes you appreciate the power of collective belief.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If enough people decide that something has value,
Right.
whether it's a tulip bulb or a stock certificate
Uh-huh.
or even a digital currency,
Yeah.
it can create its own reality,
Absolutely.
at least for a while.
At least for a while.
That's kind of the fascinating paradox of money.
It is.
It's both an illusion
Yeah.
and this powerful force that shapes our lives,
It really does.
determines what we can buy,
Uh-huh.
where we live,
Yeah.
even how we perceive our own worth.
That's a powerful thought.
So after all of this,
Yeah.
is money the greatest illusion of humanity?
It might be one of them. But maybe the real illusion, the idea that money is the only measure of value.
Oh, I see what you mean.
What if we valued things differently?
Yeah,
What if we placed more emphasis on community
right.
and sustainability
Yeah.
and well-being rather than just financial gain? Money plays a crucial role. It lets us trade, invest, drive economic activity.
It's how the world works.
Right. But maybe the lesson is to be more aware, more skeptical, more critical of how we've built things.
To not just take it for granted.
Exactly. To see that money is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
So we need to be mindful of how we use it.
Yes. And mindful of the human factors that can distort the system. The greed, the fear, the herd mentality.
All those things that lead to bubbles and crashes. So what's the takeaway for everyone listening?
Be informed. Be skeptical. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Learn about the history of money and finance, what influences its value, and the potential for both progress and disruption.
And don't let the illusion blind you.
That's it. Don't let the idea of money control your judgment or your values.
That's some great advice. We've covered so much in this deep dive, from ancient shells to Bitcoin, from the inner workings of the Fed to the lessons of financial crises.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And I hope everyone listening has a better understanding of this crazy, complex world of money now.
Me too. It's something we need to keep thinking about critically. After all, money may be an illusion, but its impact on us is very real.
That's for sure. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.